it's just going to be about casting a spell that your opponent isn't prepared to counter, like to answer on that particular turn. Whether that be, let's say, a Nimble Mongoose when Jarvis leaves a mana for removal, or baiting out a Force of Will to resolve something like a Gurmag Angler.
All right, sounds good. Just hey Mike, if you have the live screen so that we don't have the delay. And then, yeah, this is a really interesting take here. So I think I agree with you just in the sense that this is going to be a game about mana. It's going to be about tempo. So obviously turn 1 Delver Secrets is going to be very powerful here. I imagine Jarvis might just throw a Lightning Bolt at this Delver.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, you made a good point about Gurmag Angler in this matchup, and I think one way to answer that with Tarmogoyf at least is the Tarfire that Mislav has in his hand.
Yeah, I agree with that. But you still have to resolve that Tarmogoyf in the first place, and it looks like Jarvis drew one of his 2 True Name Nemesis, which is one of the scariest cards from the Rug Delver side. Once it comes in play, there's basically no answer to it. The only things you can do are burn them upstairs or flip a Delver and hope that's good enough. But in these Delver matchups, that's usually not the case.
Right. We need to be wary. I mean, I know Jarvis is quite talented as a Magic player. He's definitely going to pick up on the cue that if, Mislav doesn't play a second land for turn off that Brainstorm, that, the Wasteland, the aggro Wasteland might be a good play. That would set him back from the True Name Nemesis, like you mentioned, but, the potential...
Oh my gosh, Jarvis is going for it. That is absurd. I would never do that in Jarvis's seat, but unless he draws a land right now, he's going to get paid off. Because I think Jarvis's hand is set up fairly well, that if he just plays land bolt, he's in a good position. He could be afraid of, let's say, a Daze coming back and then a Wasteland, and then he's really far behind. But yeah, this game might just be over right now.
That is incredible.
Yeah, if I was in Jarvis's seat, I think I would have bolted that Delver, and if I got Daze, I'd force back. But now he just looks like a genius, and I guess that's why he's playing the match and I'm doing commentary, huh? 200
IQ play by Jarvis. It seems like Mislav is not... I mean, he has to draw a land in maybe the next turn, otherwise he's going to be in big trouble. But Jarvis also doesn't have a second land either.
Yeah. So if our Rug Delver pilot draws a Wasteland, we're just going to be playing draw go. Please, this would be an amazing game to see. This is one of the reasons I like Legacy. It's just, why would you play Magic when you could both mana screw each other and then just play draw go for 3 turns until one of you gets lucky enough to draw another land? There's just no better way to play Magic.
Well, unfortunately, it looks like Mislav does not pick up a land or a Wasteland. He's just instead going to have to discard. Does he have 8 cards here? He does, yeah.
Don't look at the downside of this. Just think of it as him working towards threshold. There's benefits and downsides of every situation. So, keep a positive mentality.
I love it.
I mean, Jarvis is just going to flip 2 Delvers in a row, and then I think the game's pretty much over.
Yeah. Plus, he's got multiple Force of Wills in hand.
Yeah, I think he might just be conceding now. Yeah, his hand was one of his removal spells was a Dismember, anyways. So that's a big ask to be able to come back from that kind of life loss.
I see it. So now looking at sideboards, Jarvis is already going ahead adding a few cards in. He's looks like he's moved the Pyroblasts, the Edicts, and just a bunch of removal.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a Delver. It's a Delver mirror, so there aren't actually that many cards to board in. Okay. When I used to play a lot of Rug Beers, I was a fan of bringing in my Red Blast and trimming down on your Lightning Bolts and things like that because there weren't a lot of targets. But Jarvis's deck, from playing from the Rug side, has a lot more targets for small removal spells. Like he's got the Young Pyromancer, which is a critical threat that needs to be answered very quickly. So from the Rug side, I want to be leaving in more removal spells. And I think I also would leave in some of those Force of Wills as well, because the Gurmag Anglers and the True Name threats from the Grixis side are just so powerful that being down a card doesn't matter if you're just going to win or lose based on one spell.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point, because I'm noticing the one glaring difference between both players sideboarding is that, Jarvis has the Force of Wills, whereas Mislav doesn't. Yeah. And, Gurmag Angler is... I guess it's just a matter of how you can react to the threats. I'm assuming Jarvis is keeping Force of Will because it also does handle Tarmogoyf to a degree. I'm not sure what Mislav's plan exactly is for Gurmag Angler post-board. Maybe he's just he's got one Dismember, and then maybe blocking it with True Name. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that Jarvis is on the draw, so that does make Force of Will better because you get an extra card and you need it because you start off with a mana disadvantage. And I also think there's merit to Force of Will being really powerful in the matchup because let's say Jarvis were to play something like a Young Pyromancer, and then he tries to answer it with something like a Lightning Bolt. If you Force of Will that, you get a token right away, and if that resolves, this Rug deck is a little light on removal, especially for Young Pyromancer. So if it lives for a turn, Jarvis untaps and plays 3 cantrips, and the game's over. And from the Rug side as well, if Jarvis were to play, say, a Gurmag Angler with a mana up, you don't have Force of Will in your deck. You have 4 Dazes, but you have to have 2 right away and 2 lands to return, and that's a lot to ask. So I like Force of Will in this matchup, and I think Jarvis is agreeing with me, but it's possible that the game also plays out in a way where the raw card advantage is just too important, where you go 1-for-1, wastelanding, and dazing too many threats, and you just get stuck with this 2-for-1 in your hand that costs you a game.
Right. Both players are going to mulligan here moving into game 2. I think Mislav scried to the bottom, and Jarvis has kept the Young Pyromancer. Pyromancer being a decent threat that can go wide. Also pairs nicely with the Daze and the Force of Will in Jarvis's hand. Mislav did find a second land this time off the Ponder, so it looks like we're going to actually dive into the game a little bit deeper than turn 1 kill.
Yeah. It is pretty tempting in these kind of matchups to want to wait until, say, turn 3 or not even turn 3, let's say 3 mana, because who knows, with Wastelands flying around, how long that'll take, to play a Young Pyromancer through a Daze and then play something like a Ponder to get a creature out of it right away. But with the way Jarvis's hand is lining up, it looks like he might want to just cast it on turn 2, because if he just plays land past the turn, he opens himself up to just another threat like a Tarmogoyf coming down, or another Delver or a Delver or Nimble Mongoose, and then he might be too far behind for the Young Pyromancer to pull him ahead.
Exactly. I mean, this matchup is about tempo, like you mentioned earlier before, not using your mana from 1 turn, 2 mana. Like in the whole sum of the game, right? Like you probably have like 4 or 5 turns, and like in those 4 or 5 turns, there's a total of 1 or 2 mana that you can use every turn. Skipping out on 2 mana is like just a big chunk of the total mana you expend the whole game.
I think he actually played that really well. If you notice, he didn't use his Daze when it looked really opportune, and he also untapped before casting his Lightning Bolt to play around Jarvis's Daze. So basically, is the way he was prioritizing it is if he drew a land, he could just cast True Name Nemesis. I think he could go, land True Name and then have Daze backup, which is really strong. Or he could just play the longer game and then blow Jarvis out this way, where if Jarvis tries to protect, there's not a really great way to protect. So his only protection spell would be that Force of Will, and then he would get to Daze of Force of Will, and then play his Volcanic Island again, and then be able to Red Blast Jarvis's next spell. Like that was a huge turn. That's
a masterful play by Mislav the Mooj. Can we get some Moojes in the chat? Because oh my god, I remember when Mislav first played on Magic Online, the first season where Legacy Leagues were there, he had racked up 40 trophies or something like that. It was insane. And you can tell that he's a good player, just like the way he's navigating this thing. I'm very curious as to why Jarvis decided to use the Force of Will there instead of the Daze. Do you think it has to do with just falling behind on tempo?
You said, well, I mean, he wasn't tapped out. He couldn't have dazed it.
I'm dumb. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I know. It's okay.
And
I actually do like that, because it's with the way that Jarvis's hand plays out, like the way that Jarvis played that by forcing a removal spell on a Young Pyromancer, it would signal to me on the Rug side that his hand wasn't fantastic, and being able to Red Blast even like a low value spell like a Ponder gets another card in the graveyard for that Nimble Mongoose to start crashing in, and it also keeps Jarvis from finding potential outs, threats, or answers to the Mongoose.
Exactly. I think in this board position, both players are developing very slowly, and Mislav is ever so slightly ahead.
Yeah, a good draw set from either side could break this open. If I was Mislav, I don't think I would cast that Stifle on if Jarvis tried to fetch, I don't think I would Stifle that. I would save that for Force of Will. But if Jarvis tries to Wasteland, you do need to Stifle that, I believe, because you need access to both colors.
Right. Defensive utility of Stifle.
Yeah. If I'm Jarvis, I might not Wasteland. If I think that my best out is casting a Gurmag through a Daze or casting a True Name Nemesis. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I think I'd still kill the Tropical Island because it's just if he draws and casts a Tarmogoyf, it puts you so far behind. And it also, if he were to say draw and cast a Delver, you would want to Daze that.
And I like this upkeep activation of Wasteland to bottleneck some of Mislav's mana.
Yeah, it just makes it so if he drew a Tarmogoyf this turn, he couldn't cast it. Just a little bit more punishing.
Right, and this Flusterstorm is going to be quite the blowout.
I mean, he just gets to Daze it and pick the targeted land back up. So basically, Jarvis traded Wasteland Flusterstorm for a Stifle and Daze and one of his mana because he gets to untap. I mean, yeah, so. It's also possible that I think he should have used the land that Jarvis had targeted with the Stifle, and then he would have been able to cast a 2-drop if he drew it this turn. Because I think he kept his Tropical Island untapped because he wanted to cast Nimble Mongoose if he drew it, but I don't think that's worth it because if the Trop dies, let's say Jarvis flustered or just a sequence where let's say the Trop. That didn't play out exactly that way. You would want the untapped mana. Like you would want to go land Ponder if you drew it. And I'm not sure I would cast a Nimble Mongoose into a Daze anyways. But it's pretty interesting that he chose that line. I'd like to ask him why he did it. Maybe I'm missing something there.
How do you feel about him wasting the Underground Sea over saving the land for maybe like a True Name Nemesis?
Oh no! I want to waste the Underground Sea because he has. Gurmag Angler? Yeah. I don't want to force a Gurmag Angler unless I have to. From the Rug side, I'm pretty much always going to Wasteland at every opportunity I have because the Grixis deck is so mana intensive with Young Pyromancer costing essentially 3 to make your first creature. True Name Nemesis, Diabolic Edict, Jarvis even has a Snapcaster. So I do like that Wasteland.
Gotcha, yeah. I mean, I think the more I think about it, like throwing the Tarmogoyf into the Daze, not fighting over it with the Force of Will, just like you are sort of leveraging the mana advantage that you're developing by forcing Jarvis to buy back bounce all his lands, not cast any of the expensive hitters off the top of his deck. Like imagine if Jarvis draws Snapcaster Mage right now, it's just like doesn't do anything, and Jarvis is just slowly going lower and lower. I
think I might have Force of Willed that for that Tarmogoyf.
Interesting.
Because Jarvis is so far behind, and it really puts the screws down to him, and it just puts so much pressure that I think it's hard for him to pull out. And it's clear that Jarvis doesn't have lands, so even if he drew, let's say, a Gurmag Angler, he wouldn't have the black mana to cast it. If he has True Name Nemesis, he doesn't have the 3 mana to cast it. So the scariest threat would be like a land. Jarvis drawing a land and then a Young Pyromancer, and then the following turn playing cantrips. But it's possible that with a Mongoose and a Tarmogoyf attacking, that he would just be at such a low life total it wouldn't be relevant.
Right. It looks like hitting the Underground Sea earlier is paying off too, cutting off Jarvis from casting the Diabolic Edict.
Yeah, and if you look at the way this game is played out, it looks like he doesn't want to cast. He doesn't want to use this. He's either wanting to play around another Daze with his True Name Nemesis, or he's just holding it for Force of Will. So I guess maybe his plan is to develop in a way where he just kills Jarvis solely with the Nimble Mongoose.
Yeah.
Or it's possible that he wants to not cast True Name Nemesis into an untapped Volcanic Island due to something like a Red Elemental Blast.
Right. It seems like Mislav. I mean, it just seems like he's playing very super cautiously. Like he's already extremely ahead. Why deploy the True Name Nemesis? Especially if you don't have a blue card. Also, if you wait, you might draw a blue card to deploy the True Name Nemesis through Daze.
I think this game is over now. Once he casts this Tarmogoyf, that's going to prompt a Force of Will from Jarvis. I believe I would Force of Will back, and then I think that's it. Right, Jarvis, even if he draws a land for that True Name Assist, both threats are lethal, and we're going to be going to Game 3.
Yep. This is a very good example of just the Rug Delver deck getting under its larger Delver opponent, I guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind once we go to this next game. I wouldn't mind seeing some of the Force of Wills coming out of Jarvis's deck once he's on the play, and then I think some more Force of Will should come in on the other side, because you really need the free spell depending on if you're on the draw, because the mana is so strained in this matchup.
Right.
Yeah.
And here, Mislav not having cast the True Name Nemesis at all the entire game is going to get rewarded by having that as a blue card to pitch the Force of Will, when otherwise it may have been dazed or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. And then this Force is going to come in on the other side, and that's it.
Interestingly enough, I mean, do you think True Name Nemesis is considered like a new? Wait, he let the Nimble Mongoose die? Interesting. Okay. I mean, I guess
maybe he didn't want to get Flusterstormed. Jarvis had shown him. Jarvis had showed him Flusterstorm.
Right.
And if you just cast the True Name, that would play around that. But now I think Jarvis should have wastelanded him here.
Okay. Yeah. To make the days live. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, looks like Mislav draws a blue card anyway, so this True Name is going to be, pretty immune. No Force of Will.
Yeah.
Ooh. This is an interesting trick for all the boys and girls at home.
Yeah, that's a nice line by Jarvis. He could have played around it by using his fetch land first, but if your hand was just blank, you could do that. But with the Force of Will backup, if Jarvis has a daze, then I think it's just game over. Yeah. Like if one of Jarvis's last cards is a daze, that means the rest of his hand is bad enough where it's not going to matter.
Right.
Yeah. And
this is pretty interesting too. That lightning bolt that was in Jarvis's hand the entire game almost did nothing, just by the nature of Tarmogoyf's got a big butt. True Name is hexproof for Shroud or whatever you want to call it. Same with Nimble Mongoose.
Those cheap burn spells aren't very strong against these tech boys.
And looking at the way Mislav is reconfiguring his deck, he's bringing in an extra Force of Will, instead cutting a Spell Pierce and a Stifle. So you're seeing that he's lowering his curve a little bit just by virtue of being on the draw, not being able to have enough lands in play as quickly as possible. I didn't get to see if Jarvis is reevaluating. Did you see if he brought anything else in, changed the construction at all?
I don't think Jarvis has a lot of wiggle room in this matchup. I could see wanting something like a Sulfur Elemental because it trades with a Nimble Mongoose, but it's a 3-mana card. Even though it can't be countered due to split second, it just seems pretty mediocre. So I think Jarvis keeping it the same is strong.
Okay, well, looking at both players' 7-card hands, my gut reaction is that they look somewhat mediocre. At least Jarvis has a cantrip. Would you mulligan either of these hands?
I would definitely keep on Jarvis's side. From as the Grixis deck, I generally want to be in the control role, and from the Rug side, it's a pretty medium hand. I could see it going either way. Like something like a Brainstorm would really catch you up, and if you draw another land, you're probably dead. But he kept, which I think is, I think both are reasonable. It just feels a little ambitious either way. I think because the way the games play out is if Jarvis's list has more cantrips than the average list, so it's more likely that he leads with something like a cantrip. And if you just wasteland, it's essentially a rebuy.
Okay. Yep. This seems very interesting. It looks like Jarvis did find a Ponder and a Young Pyromancer off this preordain. Kept both. So he's got the gas flowing, but
I think he's just going to keep. I think he's going to get wastelanded again, and I think he's going to just keep digging for more lands. Is the way that I would play this game from Jarvis's side. And I like wastelanding from the other side as well, because your hand is weak, and I think you just want to drag it out farther.
Right, fine.
Yeah. I will say that Jarvis fetching and then cantripping over and over again and then getting wastelanded, it doesn't produce anything on the board, but what it does do is it essentially keeps the board even while getting Jarvis closer to Gurmagangler for free. So I think this turn Jarvis gets to cast a 1-mana 5/5. If you don't have Force of Will, you're dead. This is an extremely hard card for the Rug deck to beat.
Yeah, no, this is I don't even know, at this point, what is Mislav supposed to do? Now Jarvis just gets to
that's a stretch. You have one in your deck. He doesn't have his Tarfire for his Tarmogoyf. There's no creatures in the graveyard. There's a lot missing, I think, from the Rug side. He could find his True Name Nemesis that could brickwall something like a Tarmogoyf, but it's looking pretty grim at this point. Because if you think about it, he's only got 4 turns to do it, and that doesn't even count as Jarvis is just going to cast another threat this turn.
Right, and if Mislav loses this game, he's going to be knocked out of the tournament. Drawing a daze off the top, not looking so hot. Jarvis firmly in the driver's seat here. Could even overcommit with the young Pyromancer, but chooses to brainstorm instead.
I think he was looking for another land because the way that Mislav's hand is playing out, it's clear. I think it's clear to Jarvis that he has removal spells and just not a lot to do. I think he might have removal spells and things like Spell Pierce, and he just wanted to try to extend the game. And that means that if Jarvis were to play his young Pyromancer, it would get answered for no value. So if he does brainstorm and then maybe get another land for the next turn, he could play young Pyromancer and make a token with a cantrip. Right,
but unfortunately, it looks like Jarvis has brainstormed into what I would consider the literal nuts here. We've got, 4 counter spells now? Pyroblast, Daze, Flusterstorm, Forcible, and a blue card. I think Jarvis has just got his cake and he's eating it too. Like,
if I'm Jarvis, I'm not sure what it's hard to say what you want to do with this brainstorm. I would just keep my options open. I think the Pyroblast is one of the weakest cards. I think the Force of Will is too. I'd be incentivized to keep everything but those two because there's not a lot from the Rug side that I would want to Pyroblast. Something like True Name Nemesis, Brainstorm, Delver of Secrets. Those are the best 3 targets for the card, and none of those are really threatening with Daze in your hand. And I just don't really see a good reason to do that. And Flusterstorm can also protect against something like a Lightning Bolt where Pyroblast can't. So I do like the line that Jarvis took. It looks like we were on the same wavelength there.
It looks like Jarvis is going to press his advantage a little bit further, putting a Delver of Secrets into play. I guess this would, if the Delver flips, that would make it a 2-turn clock.
Yeah, you mostly just want to cast the Delver because he's got removal spells in his hand. And so putting the Delver in play just baits out removal, and then next turn you get to play Young Pyromancer. If he were to play another removal spell on it, I think you might just send the Lightning Bolt upstairs. It would put him down from, it would put him to 10 to 7. You would get another token, and then every other fetch land would put him, if he fetched even one time, like the fetch land he has in play, it would put him to 6, and the Gurmag plus the token would be the last 6 points of damage.
Okay, right. So here, I don't know. Mislav has to find a brainstorm here. I think that's probably one of the very few cards that gets him out of this situation. And then he has to also draw into the nuts. I mean, I believe in the Mooj though. So let's see.
I think at this point, actually, there's little. If he drew brainstorm, it's just nothing. There's nothing that can answer that Gurmag Angler, and through Jarvis's Daze and Flusterstorm. Not to mention that he has to answer the Young Pyromancer too before Jarvis casts the 3 spells in his hand. I think this one's over, but we just don't. It's just got a few more minutes to play out is how I would describe it.
Gotcha. And Jarvis is going to basically, make it ho, Force of Will here, dazing, and probably going to follow up with Flusterstorm with the Lightning Bolt. 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the Lightning Bolt, that should be lethal.
I mean, he could daze 2 copies of this Flusterstorm and then pay for the last one. And then he's facing down a Gurmag and 2 1/1s and a Bolt in Jarvis's hand. So, and then I think he's going to play his Delver. Jarvis can Bolt it and just attack.
Yep. Or not even, maybe just no, you're right.
Yeah, he can force the Lightning Bolt, and then he can chump block the Gurmag Angler. It's just a lot of bad choices. The board has fallen too far behind at this point, and Rug is one of those decks that doesn't have any ways to catch up, which is why decks that can swarm the board like Elves or let's say Death and Taxes can put themselves in favorable positions against Rug.
Right, and this is kind of interesting what you were talking about earlier. The Rug Delver deck, it used to be the king of the hill back in the day, 2012-ish maybe, but I don't think that Nimble Mongoose has aged especially well. And even Tarmogoyf, is just not as impressive as something like Gurmag Angler, for example.
I think cards like Tarmogoyf definitely do have their spots because you don't have to set them up. But a card like Nimble Mongoose has faded. If you look at Gurmag Angler or all the new cards that lots of other decks have gotten, but if you think about when Rug is the best, sometimes there are metagames where it's great. If you think back into, let's say, 2012 when it was great, the best decks were Stoneblade, Maverick, and Combo. Like those, other than Rug, those are the 3 most popular decks, and Rug eats Combo alive. Stoneblade was a very clunky deck, which its cheap counter spells and mana denial took advantage of, and Maverick was a deck where the best card in the sideboard was Submerge, so that was a free live counterspell that was very strong against that deck. And almost all of their creatures other than Knight were really vulnerable to 1-mana removal spells. So Rug's cheap interaction could snowball through the games there as well.
Right. So it looks like Jarvis is going to advance 2-1 into the next stage where he's going to fight against... I'm not actually sure. I think we can pull up the bracket later. But joining him in the next round next week will be, let's see, today... Wilson lost to Andrea Mengucci, and then round 1, Vincent won against Javier Dominguez. So our last round is going to be Brian Braun-Duin against, do we know who it is? Phil Gallagher. Okay, so this is going to be interesting. My bets are we will see a lot of the same that we've seen before. These two players are pretty, adamant about playing the decks that they've been playing. I know, so I'm excited for that. I think on that note, we can cut to commercial, and we'll see you guys in a bit. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.